It does seem to me that with that sort of formula, the tests are very important in evaluating teachers. If they don't see growth in that metric, then they're going to be gone after a certain amount of time.
It's actually not just the test, no. In fact, student growth and achievement itself is not even that. So there are three different components, and even student growth and achievement it's not all the growth on the state assessment. It also includes the student learning objectives. So what we've created is what we call in education a multiple measures system. So it's including information from a variety of different sources. So when we designed it, there are 4 different summative ratings. There's ineffective, developing, effective, and highly effective. And in developing those ratings, we knew that for right now, the one that was going to receive the most attention, although quite honestly it shouldn't be because it affects the smallest number of people in our system, but nonetheless, because it has the employment consequences, it's the ineffective category that is receiving the most attention. Some people will direct that back to me and saying that it's receiving the most attention from me, and quite honestly, it's the one I'm much more focused on. How do we help our good teachers become great and our great teachers become leaders, and that's much more important to me. Nonetheless, I understand why it receives a lot of attention because it does affect people's employment. But when we designed it, because we knew that that was the case, we wanted to be absolutely confident that if someone received an ineffective rating, there was no question that this was someone who was not currently successfully serving students well. And that was based on their work within their school and their work with families and their work with their colleagues. It's based on observations of their teaching. It's based on their student outcomes. There is no question in my mind that if someone receives an ineffective, that this is someone who is currently not performing where they need to be. And furthermore, if that's the case, these folks in our system receive support and feedback to improve, and they're clear about what it is that's not going well, where they have some strengths, and what they need to do differently. So they also have their own responsibility to go and seek out assistance. So the certification aspect of it, let's think what you just said. Let's think through that. So if I'm ineffective, the only person whose certification is affected by this system is someone who is ineffective for the first year that this applies to. Mm-hmm. They get feedback and support, then they're ineffective again the next year. They get more feedback, then they're ineffective again. They get more feedback specifically on what they need to do differently. They get ineffective again, they get more feedback, and then they're ineffective again. Those are the only people in our system whose certification will not be renewed. To be quite honest with you, when you explain that to regular people out in the community, that is beyond reasonable. And in fact, I think it's something that in the future we need to be thinking about whether or not 5 years is more than it needs to be. Now that's certification. That doesn't apply to their employment. The reason that we made it 5 years is because certification is it's their ability to stay in this profession. So that's why we made it 5 years. But that doesn't mean that they keep their current employment for 5 years. So our expectation for our districts is at minimum, after 2 years of being ineffective, receiving feedback, not being able to move to that category of developing, at minimum that they would need to seek other employment. But again, that's not where we should be directing our attention. It's a small number of people, and there's no question that if they're in that category, they're not serving students well.
The teachers that I talk to say that it's now affecting the classroom because they feel like they are teaching to the test. Is that okay with you?
I don't really know what that means, to be honest with you.
All right, let me read you a couple quotes then.
I mean,
we
I hear
can
it
vet
all
that
the
out.
time,
But if you hear it all the time, that
obviously
is, it's not that they're not making it up. It's there, again, it could speak to the confusion we talked about, correct? I mean, does it worry you then that if they're saying they're teaching to the test, they're changing the way they teach in a classroom to a way that they're not comfortable with, and that's going to have an impact on student learning.
I think we need to be changing the way that we teach. I think there are a ton of great teachers all across our state, but I think that we have not, as a state, been able to help our students reach the levels of achievement that they need to be successful. That's crystal clear. That is clear from the information that we have about assessment results. It's clear about when you look at our employment rate. It's clear when you speak to business leaders. It's clear to me when I speak with families. It's clear to me when I speak with university recruiters. So there isn't any argument about the fact that we need to change and we need to improve. When I hear people say teach to the test, the reason that I ask the question about what does that mean is because what we're asking of people is that they use the standards to construct curriculum that helps the students reach the standards that we need them to reach. So that is teaching not to a test, but teaching to the expectations that we have. You're actually receiving the content and the skills and the knowledge that you need to.
You're saying good then. Good. You should be teaching to the test, and if the test is designed accurately. And
if you're teaching to the test, meaning that you're practicing tests, that would be very troubling to me. Mm-hmm. But here's what I know. When I visit great schools, and when I say great schools, I mean great schools by every measure. Happy kids, happy teachers, happy parents. You walk in, there's clearly enthusiasm for learning, joyful classroom environments, and schools who are seeing great results on their state assessments, schools whose improvement from year to year is just continually growing and growing and growing. On the state assessment, you don't see children sitting around practicing test taking. You see great instruction.
This was a common thread I heard. I'll just read you this quote. This was from the 6th grade teacher. She said she's concerned about the statewide testing, and both of these teachers said they aren't against evaluation. That's something that they're used to for a long time. But they do object to how right now the kneecap is being used and then the next test. She says, I don't go home with these children. I don't know who
is going home and being fed dinner. I don't know what they're going home with. I mean, I don't know whose dog died, and it's a one and done test. They're going to take this test, and if they had a bad day and they don't perform, they're being held accountable, as am I.
How do you respond to that?
Well, that's exactly why we've designed it the way that we've designed it. So we've said that when you look at when a student is assessed, it's not just one student, and not every single student is, if you have outliers, for example, a student has a bad day, something happens, we're looking at the median performance in the classroom, and we're looking at that over 2 years, and we're looking at it based on growth. So, I mean, I'd be happy to walk you through the details of how that works, but I am completely confident that the way that we've designed this accounts for the kind of situations that I've dealt with as a teacher that we all know happen. This is looking at over time with multiple students. What is the progress that those students make in comparison to similar students with the same performance in the past? So I feel very confident in what we've designed.
Talking about the students, let's specifically look at high school and what the tests mean in terms of graduation. So explain that if you could. What do they mean for a junior going to a senior year, taking the tests? What's the impact for them?
So in 2003, which was about when the graduates for whom the requirements that we're discussing actually are going into effect, was when those students were, I'd say, about in first grade. The state put into place new secondary school regulations, and it began the process of rolling out a system of expectations for graduation that said that we wanted to look at a variety of different factors in students' school experience, including their classwork, including their performance-based experience and then now including their state assessment. The inclusion of the state assessment, including the expectation that students be partially proficient on the state assessment, occurred before I came to Rhode Island. When I came to Rhode Island and discovered that the class of 2012 would be expected to be partially proficient on the state assessment, and then I looked at the information and I looked at the numbers of students, thousands of them who were not partially proficient, I started to ask the question about what happens if they're not. And there was a lack of clarity. Depending on who I asked, I got a different answer. So it became pretty clear to us that that expectation had not been clearly communicated to families, to students, to districts, to the, what does happen if you're not partially proficient? How many chances do you get? What if you're still not? All of the questions that need to be answered had not been answered. So we began about a 6-month process with the Board of Regents in revising that regulation to answer all of those questions. And so we revised the regulation, we revised our communication tools, we revised our practices, and we moved the date. And we moved the date to 2014. And that is next year's graduating class. So the students in the graduating class of 2014 have those 3 components that they need to demonstrate their proficiency, and it includes their coursework, it includes their performance-based, which is typically a senior project, although not in every district, and it includes being at least partially proficient on the state assessment.
You say there are 3 components, but what if they just do not score well on that test? Can they graduate? Do they get a diploma?
So there are a variety of different safeguards on that. First of all, I think it's important to be really clear on where we've set the expectation. The expectation is that Rhode Island students graduating in the spring of 2014 be partially proficient on 10th grade standards.
The way you say that's just low anyway. That's just too low
I'm
as it is.
saying it's very reasonable and absolutely achievable by the students in this state.
Do you think we should set the bar higher?
I think that one of the things that I've said before when I'm talking with people about this is that the only argument about this that I don't feel comfortable having is when people say, is that bar high enough? Because I'm not sure that it is. But I feel like it's at least the first step that we have to take as a state. It is a disservice to our students to give them a diploma, to congratulate them and tell them that they are ready to go off and tackle the world and do whatever's next. College, job, career training, technical training, apprenticeship, because the truth of the matter is that many of them are not. Thousands of them are not. And we have to do something about that. And so this has been years in the making. Many things have changed. So I do believe that we've set the bar in at least the place where I can at least feel somewhat comfortable that we can send them off knowing that they're going to be better prepared than they might have been before. To go back to your question, there are other safeguards in place. So first of all, when we get the results back here in a couple of weeks now, this will be the first time that students for whom the new requirements apply to get their actual results. And so I'm quite confident that there will be a reaction, as there should be, on the part of those students and their families. Sure. Those students, in most cases, were not partially proficient on the state assessment when they were in 8th grade and before. So we have been encouraging from the time I got here in the state to say to schools, to families, to students, look back at the results. Where were you then? Find all the resources that are available through your school to get up to speed on where you need to be. And math is the biggest challenge. Many, many more students are proficient on our reading assessment than on our math assessment. And math is the challenge for our state. but nonetheless, so the results come out. This will be the first time they have them. But the important thing for everyone in the state to understand is that each student has at least 3 opportunities. They have 3 opportunities to take an assessment, and then there are other safeguards as well. So this is the first administration. If a student is not partially proficient on the state assessment when they get these results back, they will have the opportunity to take the assessment again next fall. If they take the assessment again next fall and they have, because of the work they've been doing and the support they've been getting, they then reach partially proficient. So again, they'll be a senior at that point. 12th grade, are they partially proficient on 10th grade standards by the fall of 12th grade? If they are, then they still are able, at least with that portion of the graduation requirements, they've met that portion of the graduation requirements. In addition to that, if they have shown growth, so even if they don't reach at least partially proficient, if they've shown that they've made meaningful growth from the administration the year before, then they still are able to graduate. And the targets for what that growth will be provided as well. If they are not partially proficient and they don't make the growth, there is a third administration of the assessment that they have an opportunity to take.
At the end of that school year?
It's in the early spring.
Meaningful growth. I mean, that's such a squishy term. I mean, moving the goalpost.
It sounds squishy.
It does.
But it's not. It's what our definition of growth is. Growth that is. I mean, I'll use the statistical language, and then I'll tell you what I mean by that, because everybody may not follow it. So if that growth is statistically significant. And what that means in regular people talk is that it didn't happen by chance. So it means that they actually made growth. In a lot of cases, it's 5 questions more, right? So we've sort of been using that as a ballpark, but it's going to be different for every student. But we are going to provide that information, so it's not going to be squishy for each individual. It's just that's the definition of what growth is.
The high school teacher in particular pointed out that she's seeing students in her classroom feel the stress about the testing because down the road it's going to have an impact on them in their senior year.
What they do is they get extremely frustrated and they put their head down. And you go over and you tell them to get their head up and they'll get working, but you can see their frustration because they want to do well. You can see it in their face. But the test is just, they struggle with it.
Can you understand why a lot of high school students might be feeling tremendous pressure?
I can understand that.
What do you say to them?
I can. What I would say to them is that the supports are available. We have created online modules for students to be able to take to get additional tutoring on math. We have people available on contract for math tutoring. Districts have done summer schools, after-school programs. The support is available. So yes, it means that some sleeves are going to have to be rolled up and some work is going to have to be done, but it is a reachable goal. I think that is what is so important. This is not unattainable. And furthermore, the stress is really going to come if we went ahead and gave a diploma to a student who is not ready, who then goes off to do whatever their dreams are for themselves, and they find doors being closed to them. That's when the stress really sets in, because then they're no longer high school students. They are fully adults, and they're going to find themselves out in the world without the kind of opportunity that they really need.